It's a Saturday afternoon here on YAHOO, and we check in Newark, UFC 128. Kevin Iole, our lead MMA writer, is on the scene. Kevin, how you doing?
I am doing very well. Did my walking in the city, Steve. Enjoyed that, so ready to go to see some good fights tonight.
And by the city, you mean Newark, of course.
Haha, I don't think I'd be here talking to you if I was in Newark. We were in the city's so nice they named it twice.
Oh, man. Poor New Jersey. My poor Newark. So the event is tonight over at the Prudential Center. Interesting event, and I think the main event, to me, has a lot of intrigue now with some of the stuff that went on during the week with Jon Jones exuding confidence, actually signing autographs, UFC champion 2011. He is the favorite. He's minus 190 against Mauricio Shogun, who comes back at plus 160, and we like to look at it by the odds. So, by the odds, Kevin, what do you think of the fight?
Oh, by the odds, there's no question that you take Shogun Rua. No question. I mean, you're getting the champion at, plus money like that. I mean, no doubt you take the champion. I think it's a tough matchup for him. I like Jones in the fight very slightly because of the wrestling. Forced to make a pick one way or the other, I pick Jones to win, because I think with the wrestling advantage he has and the length, it's going to create some problems for Shogun Rua. But Rua is a phenomenal striker. He's got top of the world Muay Thai skills. He's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. He's really got everything. He's kind of on a roll right now. So Jon Jones is catching him at his best. There's no doubt about that. But when you're talking, should Jon Jones be favored by better than 2-1? I just don't see that. I think if he's favored, it should be very minimally. And so, if I'm taking it, I think you have to take this chance at plus money with a fighter as good as Shogun Rua. So I would go with Rua at plus 165. I'm
with you on the betting angle with Rua getting plus 160. I guess my big question with Jon Jones is, has he ever been hit? We've seen other guys who have a wrestling background, the first time they get popped, all of a sudden, it's a different kind of fight, and I don't know that he's ever really been cracked.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly, and for a guy that hits as hard as Shogun does, I mean, that's why you have to say, hey, in any fight, whenever you have a man 200 pounds or bigger and they hit you on the chin, I don't care if he has a reputation as a puncher or not, you can get put to sleep, and that comes from, way back, we know that. So, when you're talking about a world-class guy like Shogun Rua, and Jones has not proven that he can take it, and sometimes, guys with his body type tend to not take it real well. So, we don't know that. He's been so dominant in all his fights that he's managed to win them without really taking too many strikes at all. So I think, that's an open question. Can he take it? And certainly if Jon Jones is going to become the great fighter that a lot of people are predicting he can be, then, one of the things he's going to have to do is be able to take it, because you're going to get hit when you're fighting at the top level. You're not going to dominate every single opponent. You're going to have somebody that's going to hang in there with you and go some time, and you have to be able to take it. So we have to see if Jon Jones can do that. We don't know. I think he's going to win the fight just because I think he's got a lot of things going for him, led by the wrestling. But I sure think, the value is on Shogun's side, and I take the plus money there, no doubt. I'd hop right on that.
One last thing on this fight. I love the mental side in terms of analyzing the fight because, like I said, Jones has been signing autographs, calling himself UFC champion. He talked about, when he first got the fight, he was a little in awe of Rua, and that is a big step. I kind of go back to, I remember being at the first George St. Pierre Matt Hughes fight, and St. Pierre physically obviously could beat Hughes, but mentally he cracked a little bit. Jon Jones seems like he's got it all together mentally, but then there's every once in a while you see him with the staring away at the weigh-in and getting super hyped up, and then the autograph thing where you're like, is he all the way there mentally, and can he be at 23 years old?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's as there as he can be right now. I just saw him not a half an hour ago, Steve, and he was out in the courtyard in front of the Hilton, had 2 dogs with him. There was a TV crew doing some stuff. He had a hoodie on, was smiling, very casually walking around. So he seemed to be very relaxed, very calm. So I think, he seems to be handling it. But, the moment's going to hit him when he's back there and the fight before is going on. It's ready for him to get gloved up. He can hear the place going crazy. And he knows, it's going to say to him, you know what, I'm fighting for the championship of the world. At that point, that's when it's going to be key. Can he handle the pressure, and can he perform the way he has in so many other fights? In his previous 13 fights, no problem. He performed when the bright lights came on. But when you're facing the champion and all these expectations are on you, can you deal with it? The great ones do. We'll see if he's a great one.
Uriah Faber, minus 450 against Eddie Wineland, who is plus 325. I assume that, Faber is going to win the fight, but there is a little pressure on Uriah. It's his first time in the UFC, and he does have a potential title shot on the line at 135.
I like Faber, Steve, and, even though that's a big number to lay, from a betting standpoint, I would probably pass on this fight just because I don't like to lay that kind of money. Pure picking, I just don't see how Eddie Wineland can win this fight. I think Eddie is a hard hitter, but he doesn't. I think Uriah, really outshines him in virtually every area. And I think Uriah will be able to handle his stand-up game just fine. And I think Uriah finds a way to submit Eddie with a rear naked choke at some point, probably in the second round.
Jim Miller's a big favorite. He's minus 240. He's going against Kamal Shalarus, who has a very decorated amateur wrestling career. Miller 240, Shalarus 190. I guess the hope for Shalarus here is that maybe he's the bigger, stronger guy and executes a game plan like Gray Maynard did. Maynard was really one of the only guys to give Jim Miller any trouble.
Steve, I agree with that. I did not like what I saw Shalarus on the scale yesterday. Nobody else said that, but, it seemed to me that he had a sunken eye look, and that tells me that's a fighter that really struggled to make weight. Kind of the cheeks were sucked in, the eyes were sunken, and that tells me a fighter having trouble making the weight and really had to dry himself out to get down. And if that's the case, a guy with a wrestler, you lose that burst of, if you're in that situation. Jim Miller looked fine. And so I like Jim Miller to win this fight. The WEC guys, the WEC lightweights have done much, much better than expected going into the UFC. I think the general perception of them, and correct me if I'm wrong here, was that the UFC lightweights were a cut above and that they would prove themselves to these WEC guys coming in. But the WEC lightweights right now have an advantage over UFC lightweights in the fights they fought since the merger. Yeah, but here, I would like Jim Miller no matter what. I don't think, Shalarus has the overall game that he does, but certainly with Shalarus looking the way I saw him yesterday, I'm going to go with Jim Miller.
The next fight, Nate Marquardt is minus 360. Dan Miller is plus 280. And I just worry laying big numbers on Marquardt, Kevin, because he seems to go in with the attitude of being a points fighter, and in some of these big spots he just hasn't delivered, so it makes me a little nervous.
I'm going to disagree with you here, Steve. He was supposed to fight Akiyama in this spot. Instead, Dan Miller, who was down at the bottom of the card, was going to fight Nicotone, moves up to take it. And it was 10 days' notice, and, I just think it's tough to get ready for a guy as good as Nate Marquardt with 10 days' notice. So I really do like Nate, and I think he has something to prove here. He's fighting his first fight after Dana White really blistered him and made some pretty harsh comments about, calling him a choker and that type of thing. And so, I think Nate, wants to prove that, he's an elite fighter. He wants to get back in the championship mix. And I think he's going to come out and with guns a-blazing in this fight and really looking to prove a point. I don't believe that Dan Miller poses a threat to him in any real specific area. And so I think Nate Marquardt wins this fight, and so I would feel comfortable. In this case, I would lay the $3.60 on Nate Marquardt to win.
Boy, it's amazing how the sport changes, isn't it? Brendan Schaub is minus 250 against the legendary Cro Cop, who's pulling back plus 200.
Yeah, it's interesting. Shogun Rua said to me the other day when I was talking to him about his Pride days compared to now, and he said what worked in Pride wouldn't work today. And a lot of the fans, who are passionate about Pride, won't want to hear that. But the sport every year it gets better. If you look at it and look at the evolution of the top fighters and the way the sport is going, you have to get better and you have to add something to your game and be better at the things you're good at, or you're going to get left by. Cro Cop really has never been able to add another dimension to his game, and while his striking game may be slightly better, it's not significant enough better to overcome the improvement of other guys. He is once again relaxed. It's been we've been volleying back and forth with Cro Cop. In Vancouver, he was the happy, jolly Cro Cop. In Indianapolis, not so much. I ran into him the other day. I was at the Hilton, and I was going down an escalator, and I had my head down looking at my iPad, and I heard somebody say, "Hey, how are you?" And I look up, and it was Cro Cop and a big smile, and he shook hands. And, that was something that, just 18 months ago you would have never seen. So,
yep.
He is relaxed. He did look like he was in great shape there, but I do think this is another one of those situations, Steve. Brendan Schaub, to me, is one of the up-and-comers in the UFC, and I think this, even though some people aren't going to want to hear this, I think this might be a gatekeeper fight. This is going to be one of those fights where we see, is Brendan Schaub really a competitor or not? Cro Cop is going to be there, like, to say, okay, if you can beat me, then we're going to put you into contender status. And that's what this fight, I think, is really designed to determine. Is Brendan Schaub a legit heavyweight contender?
Yep, and Cro Cop is there the entire way. He's really hard to finish. And just my comment on your Pride comment, I think the biggest thing that's changed from the Pride days is game planning. I think guys game plan now. I think guys in the past would just go in, go for broke, and there was no game planning. And I know Brendan Schaub, with his camp, is going to have a game plan against Cro Cop. I don't know if Cro Cop's going to have a game plan against Schaub. So I agree with you. I would lay the 250, and we'll see what happens in that one. Some of the other interesting fights, we'll skip over some fights, but I did want to get your comment on Anthony Njokuani pulling in plus 210. He's a gigantic dog, almost a 3-1 dog against Barbosa. Was Barbosa that impressive the first time around?
Yeah, I don't see that. Njokuani to me has been a guy that's been a little bit inconsistent, and you don't always know what you're going to get with him. But I think, it's a roll of the dice here on that fight. And so to me, if I'm getting plus money, I take a gamble on him. And he looked great yesterday. I thought he looked very well, made the weight, no problem. Barbosa, I thought, not as bad as Chalarus, but I thought, he showed the effects of making the cut. A lot of times that doesn't matter in the fight, but I think I would just I have a hunch here, and I'm going to take Anthony to win this fight.
We'll finish up on two more fights where I think you have a nice style, and it's not even a contrast. I think it's actually strength against strength. Number one, we know how good Ricardo Almeida is in terms of his resume with the jiu-jitsu. Mike Pyle is a very good submission artist on the MMA side, and Pyle's an underdog here, plus 125. Almeida is minus 155.
Almeida deserves to be favored. He's got the better resume. He's beaten the bigger names. He's been in there with the bigger names. But I bet against Mike Pyle last time out, and I was wrong. And Mike is one of those guys. I think that he's a much better fighter than he's performed. You always hear he's a great gym fighter, but he doesn't, when the lights are turned on. But the last time out, he performed. He came out, I believe he fought John Hathaway, if I'm not mistaken, and really came up big in that fight. And I think, maybe a switch turned on with him too. And I think, a lot of these guys are realizing that the money is much bigger now. The stakes are much higher. And a guy like Mike Pyle that's been around, has got to take advantage of it because there's not going to be a lot of opportunity because other guys are doing everything they can to make themselves as ready as they can and as good as they can. So, I think, maybe Mike Pyle finally is going to start fulfilling this potential that we heard. I remember 3-4 years ago, Randy Couture telling me, watch out for this guy. He's really going to be something. And you just never saw it. But I think that John Hathaway fight might be an indication that, this guy has got a really good game. I'm going to take a shot at him beating Ricardo Almeida. I think, he's got a more diverse game, even though Almeida's the bigger name, and I'm going to pick Mike Pyle.
And a guy who has not dealt with pressure mentally at times that well, although I think he's getting better working with the Florians, and that's Kurt Pellegrino in his home state of New Jersey going against Gleison Tebow. Tebow's favored at 170. Pellegrino's 140. I'll tell you the way that Pellegrino is going to win this fight, Kevin, is by standing and striking the whole time. I don't know if that's going to be his game plan because I don't think he'll be able to take down Tebow, and I do think Tebow is a guy who leaves his chin up, so we'll see if Kurt uses the right game plan and delivers in his home state.
I agree with everything you just said. I do like Pellegrino. I like him at plus money there. And I just see Pellegrino being the better fighter. He doesn't have the jiu-jitsu skills maybe that Tebow has, but I think he's got good enough jiu-jitsu, and I think he's going to be able to keep the fight on his feet, and I do think he will win that fight.
You can check for all the coverage on Yahoo Sports. Kevin is covering it along with Dave Doyle and Dave Meltzer. And remember, you can also watch UFC 128 right here on Yahoo. We've got the links on all of our stories on CageWriter.com. So check it out tonight. Very good, deep card. And you've got the pay-per-view portion, you got the Spike portion, and, of course, the portion on Facebook. Looking forward to seeing the coverage tonight and the fight card. Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you, Steve. And remember, if you can't watch it on a TV, it is on Yahoo Sports as well, so you can buy the pay-per-view on Yahoo Sports.